The Hard Men Podcast was founded in May of 2020 with the mission of bringing biblical masculinity to a world of softness. For over 5 years now, the project has held true to this mission, engaging with the idols of the culture, speaking plain truth regardless of the blowbacks, and providing practical advice for Christian men in the midst of an eroding Western civilization. The man who started this project goes by many names and carries many titles: executive pastor, CEO, husband, father, Leroy Jenkins, the commissioner, and our favorite, the Wallachian prince himself, Vlad the Impaler. We think Vlad is particularly fitting because he was a man who knew the stakes. Vlad understood that wielding power is more than exerting force. It's myth, reputation, bravery, and unyielding resolve. Vlad's reign was ruthless, yet effective. A reign built on fearlessness and spectacle for the defense of his people and homeland against the onslaught of the Mohammedan hordes. In our day, we need leaders who are willing to be hated and called names. We need men who know the stakes and are willing to take action and speak the truth. We also need men who can operate as generals, leaders who can train and call up officers and then deploy them well. Men that believe and execute on the true principle that there is no fixed pie of glory. Leaders who are proud to see their friends and comrades win. Without these high-quality leaders, our mission will fail. If the mission cannot be effectively handed down to the next generation, if we are unwilling to train and call up men to stand with us in the gate, then the mission dies with us. The mission of the Hard Men Podcast still stands to bring biblical masculinity to a world of softness. And Lord willing, this mission will continue. Today, Eric Conn returns to the show to discuss leadership, delegation, and the direction of the Hard Men Podcast as we seek to build the new Christendom. All right. Welcome back to the Hard Men Podcast. My name is Tate Taylor. I'm joined as usual by Pastor Ethan Sin and a very special guest, Eric Vladimir Conn. Welcome back to the show.
Hoorah, boys. Hoorah. It's good to be back. What a good cold open.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm honored. Vlad the Impaler.
Absolutely.
You love to see it.
We had some other people that we were going to try to, substitute in there, but I guess ChatGPT didn't like the idea of us getting information on them. So anyways, before we get kicked off here, I want to say thanks to our Patreon supporters. Really appreciate you guys. You make this show possible. If you haven't heard already, we've been mentioning it, but the all access Patreon supporters get a free Brutal American mug when they sign up here recently. So if you want a free mug on us, got the Brutal American logo on the front and the more subdued King Alfred logo on the back. If you want one of those, they are free when you sign up for the all access patronage over at Hard Men Podcast. And then you get the Brutal American show too. So
what cool. I mean, patronage goes a long way. How early in Hard Men were you a patron?
Oh man, I'm trying to think. I found a clip last night, actually. My wife was looking for something else through my videos on my phone. She's obsessed with comparing the faces of our kids when they're the same age, right? So my boy's 3 and she wants to see how he looks next to our girl. But we found a video of us in the gym at our place in Texas, and I was listening to King's Hall, and this was early 2022, I think.
Okay.
So I had been listening. I found King's Hall after finding Hard Men.
Were you the first one to find Hard Men, or was it your dad?
It was actually my dad, buddy of his, sent it to him.
I think he was an early Hard Men.
Super early patron.
Follower, yeah. Which, by the way, to be one of the early followers, you had to be pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Because, it's funny, the national conversation has shifted now where the discourse is, you saw the leaked Signal chat and people are like, whatever, man. This is old news, this kind of rhetoric. But it's just funny how much shift has happened, because in 2020, this was still
fringe,
dare I say fringe, cutting edge.
Yeah.
The Overton window shifted so much.
Yeah.
There are mainstream guys saying stuff that would have got you excommunicated 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I started the podcast and I was in conservative churches at the time. And I had many elders meetings where I was called in and, I just feel like someone who says these things, there must be something broken inside of him. And I was like, nah, I feel pretty good.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, exactly.
So we've had probably 50 questions of like, hey, where's Eric? Where did Eric go? What happened to Eric?
What happened? They killed him.
Yeah, we just got rid of him.
We have proof of life now.
Proof of life.
He's still here.
Proof of life. Well, I just want to tag this on to the Patreon thing. Mm-hmm. So you sign up for Patreon, you move to Ogden, and now you're co-hosting the show. Who's to say what becoming a Patreon member could do for you?
There's no telling.
There's no telling
what the trajectory might be.
No, but I do think that's really cool for my sake because, I started the podcast, I think in the first 3 months I had like 10 followers. There was a group of guys like Quinn Bible from Salt and Strings Butchery was like one of the first guys. And I thought he was fake because his last name was Bible.
Yeah.
And Quinn, by the way, it's like Scottish and it means Conn.
Really?
Yeah. So I was like, this is fake. I have supporters, but it was like $50 a month.
Yeah.
And, during COVID is when I started. I got furloughed, but it's just cool to see things come full circle.
Yeah.
So one of my early plugs to people would just be like the things you start, you don't know what the fruit will be long term.
Absolutely.
I think you were at the first conference.
Yeah.
Which was, 200 people at the church.
It was a blast though.
It was great. We didn't know what we were doing.
And then fast forward a couple years and like compare it to last year's conference, and it's just grown so much, and like the production value is so much higher, and it's incredible.
Yeah, honestly, like year 2, we brought Ethan on to help with the conference, and we're like, yeah, maybe you could tweak a few things, and then we had like a real conference because Ethan was putting his hand to the plow there. But I just think it's cool. I think it should be an encouragement and inspiration to people. Don't despise the day of small things. And trust what the Lord will do. I would always think of like Ecclesiastes 11, I think. You cast your bread on the waters and you don't know what's going to return to you. And that's been a really cool, I think, part of the Hard Men story. It is the way that I found Brian and Dan, because I started the podcast. Michael Foster had encouraged me to get on Twitter. And that was a lively experience. People were like, are you trying to be a shock jock? And I was like, no, I really think these things. And that might be even more disturbing to some. But,
oh, yeah.
And then, getting connected with the guys here in Ogden, moving, and then seeing people like yourself. Ethan, I don't remember what year you came.
It'll be 3 years. Yeah, it's about 3 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and, all wrapped up in, your friend Jace, Alpine Gold. He was one of the first people when I first came here. I took the tour of Ogden. I spent like 9 hours with Jace. And I was like, this guy's as insane as I am.
Yeah. There's more than one of us.
Yeah.
All the connections, like Kevin Love, I've known him for a long time. I've known Jay since like 2009.
Yeah.
I mean, we went to conferences at Foster's conference.
Yeah, in Ohio.
Like
County Before Country.
But yeah, it's been cool.
Yeah.
That was what was kind of crazy to me. I don't know if this is just like, I just fixate on things like this, but I've been to like 6 conferences, period.
Yeah.
And most of them have been here. Yeah. Like the very first one that I ever went to was here. And was just like, yeah, this is exactly.
Is that 3 of these, 1 of Joel's? That's like.
Yeah. Seriously. I've been to a few of Joel's and these.
Yeah.
That's it. And this was that first one that you guys did was the first one that I came to. And I won't ever forget the first time I ever like walked up to you in person. You like immediately knew who I was from Instagram and like shook my hand. And he was like, taught him everything he knows about lifting weights. and there's like a, like standard Eric situation when there's like him holding court with like 9 other guys who are like a foot taller than him.
Oh yeah.
Around him.
But that was before he was showing you how to not hit a slice.
Yeah. That was prior to that. That's a very recent development.
Yeah. Within the last year. Actually, in fact, we went golfing and I didn't want to go because I was like, if I get into golfing, I'm going to become obsessed with it. And that turned out to be true.
Yeah. Know yourself.
Know yourself. But yeah, so the Hard Men podcast started that. And it was really cool because Brian and Dan had invited me out to Ogden. And they said, what's kind of your dream vision? What are you trying to accomplish? And I said, guys, I'd really love to start a media company. And they said, okay, yeah, like we like the idea. We'll do it, but you have to move here. And like many of our listeners, it's a struggle, right? You got family stuff to deal with. A lot of your house, so to speak, has to be put in order. So it took us a while to get here, but we did and started the King's Hall. And yeah, early on, I was talking to Brian and Lexi about like, hey, I think you guys should do like what became Bright Hearth. So yeah, just really cool to see the things the Lord's building, and it took time, obviously, but.
And the church, I mean, even over those last 4 years has grown, and I don't know if it's changed, but it's grown in complexity and it's grown in people, and we've had an average of 25 babies born every year over the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's insane. You can't even keep track of all the pregnant women. I think when I first got here, the church, it was healthy, and I think that was really key because Dan and Brian had done such a good job pastoring, and the other pastors too. But Dan and Brian especially had put a lot of work into it for many years, in many hard years. The church was about 160, 170 people. And today I think it's average Sunday, 2 services, about 500, 480, somewhere in there.
About half kids.
Half kids, yeah. So there's been a huge impact. Super grateful for that.
It's funny that they did the same thing to you that you turned around and did to me, because they're like, yeah, we're down, but you have to move here. And I remember sending you an email. This must have been 2 years ago now. And
we actually addressed it on the show.
You literally turned around and did a King's Hall after hours and just like answered it live in the after hours. And I was like, oh gosh, like
what was it like? Should I move here?
It was basically like, here's the situation that I'm in. What do I do? Exactly.
We don't have a church. We're trying to,
trying to figure all this stuff out. Like, who are my kids going to marry? Like there's just not a ton of people that have the same convictions and like vision that we have. And he threw out the, your ancestors sailed across an ocean so they could worship freely. You know that, right? And I was like, okay.
You can't move states? Is that what you're telling me?
He literally just threw the gauntlet down. And that was one of those like mental nails in the coffin for us, was when you guys responded to that. So
yeah, which we had no idea. I mean, I would say, well, obviously like the vast majority of people are like, okay, yeah, but my church believes in lady pastors. I think we can change them. And we were kind of saying from early on, like that's a losing proposition. It was a big part of why I moved, in fact, was because I realized, yeah, you have one life to live. It's actually pretty short. Yesterday I was 20 and had a kid, and today
now you're about to be a granddad.
About to be a grandfather.
I cannot wait to see Eric and Jerry.
What's your grandmother
mode?
name?
The kids have kind of come up with a few things that maybe that they thought would be good.
Some contenders.
The main contender right now is Obergrubenführer. And I was like, guys, that's going to be a little hard for a toddler to say. And they're like, okay, it'll just be Führer. And I was like, I don't know. That's kind of the running joke. But I haven't. I told my wife, I was like, dude, we should be like Meemaw and Peepaw. She was like, no. And then, of course, because of Classical Academy, my middle son, Martin, he was like, I think it's Latin, but it would be like Avus and Avia. And I'm like, that's cool. That's pretty cool. So
I think that's a really good point. Like you blink and your kids are about to all be graduated high school.
Yeah. And so my point, I guess, with that was, you're absolutely right. My point was, you only have so many good years to pour into a thing. And I just became more convicted over time. Gresham Machen said this a long time ago in the 1920s, in the stuff he was writing. But it is impossible to turn around a liberalized organization. And so we just felt that, well, we're going to have to start new ones, and they're going to have to be explicitly conservative. Otherwise, according to conquest law, they're going to become liberalized in short order.
100%.
So yeah, that was like, build an institution instead of trying to fight people and try to convince people who are unconvinced. Surround yourself with people who already believe in the mission and want to do it with you. Look, it's hard enough anyway, right?
Yeah.
That
it's impossible to do when you're the only one.
Yeah.
And you're on an island there. Like, it's impossible to do. And not to mention, how do you expect to keep your kids when they're raised in that organization? How do you expect to find good spouses for them to marry when that's who you're surrounding yourself? It's just not going to happen.
You're fighting a war on all sides.
Yeah.
It's just not a winning plan.
No. No, it's not.
So, speaking of fighting wars on all sides, I'm going to Eric Conn transition here.
That's right.
Now that you're not fighting the hard men war, and that's kind of been handed over, Ethan and I have been kind of doing that. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so a lot of things. One of the things I've said kind of throughout this process is, Brian and I talk about it a lot, but the reward for work done well is more work. Mm-hmm. And, some of it, there was sort of like a 2-year period where Brian had told me, like, we need to have a plan for the Hard Men podcast because you just can't keep doing everything. So part of the stretch was we started King's Hall. Originally, we were kind of all taking turns writing it. And then Brian and Ben had started Haunted Cosmos. And so that was, it was taking off, but it was requiring a lot of their effort. So one of the transitions in there was, Eric, we want to appoint you as like the main producer of King's Hall. And so I took over those duties initially. Somewhere in there too, I took over, was invited into the pastorate. So as an elder at Refuge. So, already my roles were shifting, right? So I had started Hard Men podcast originally. I was keeping that going, King's Hall. And then, the pastorate. And it's like, okay, that was a lot. It was a lot to even keep that going. And then, kind of as the year, this is like last year, we had a lot of discussions as pastors, and it was sort of decided like, hey, we want you to take over as executive pastor. So leading the pastoral team at Refuge Church, really helping Brian with mission vision, and adjusting to an organization that was growing in complexity. Ethan joined the pastor team in that time frame. Ben did. So we went from...
we made 3 deacons.
Yeah, we made 3 deacons. That's right.
Yeah.
So we really started to realize like, well, now we need leaders to lead our leaders, and we need to really build a more complex hierarchy of leadership, with Moses in the hundreds and tens and 50s and thousands. Essentially, I think what was going on through that process was I was becoming no longer just a leader of tens, but then 50s, then hundreds. And now, as you guys have said, sort of like you're kind of climbing the hierarchy. And a part of that process is you've got to walk away from some things, not abandon them. But in the case of Hard Men podcast, really like I saw in Ethan and you, like, hey, these guys Ethan's doing Titus 2. You were involved in that. That's our program for St. Brendan's. I think you guys have talked about that on the show quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I was like, wow, these guys are, you're really taking the ideas that I had and you're putting legs on them and doing a great job. And a big part of that, and this is what I would say to our listeners, I wouldn't have selected you guys had not the young men and the men in our church respected you. Like, you can't just be an idea guy. And so that was part of it for me, was saying like, okay, I can't do the show anymore full time, but I think the project should exist. So this is kind of, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but this is kind of the thing where I was saying, okay, we can appoint other qualified men and we can have them have an opportunity for themselves. And that is kind of one of the cool things about organization building. It's always in flux. It's always changing. I think a healthy organization, you're not stagnant. That's what the growth is doing. And so it's providing more opportunities for other guys. One thing that I kind of throughout this whole process, so I step into executive pastor. We started kind of bullpen by committee with New Christendom Press. It was like the 3 of us. And then eventually we realized like, wow, we actually need more hierarchy there too. Mm-hmm. And so Dan and Brian were like, we think, you should be the CEO. That will help crystallize direction and leadership. And we went through the process. We hired, Martina McBride to do all our video production. So each time you do something like that, you're stepping up your game, but you're also increasing complexity. Eventually, Martin makes his way into director of operations because we see that he's super competent and qualified to do that. We hire Evan to do social media. We hire Tate. Ethan's on board, obviously. So yeah, those have kind of been the roles that I'm taking on. I've seen a lot of those questions too. I've had a lot of people ask me like, are you no longer part of this?
Yeah.
kind of the way it's functioned. So we've sat down and met and said, hey, I want to pass on to you guys sort of it's like the content formula that we use at across the channels at New Christendom Press. And then let's come up with some ideas for shows. So still weighing in on that. You guys have obviously, taken the reins and run with it. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I don't love micromanagement. I really want to find qualified men who are competent, and I want to give them accountability and responsibility, like fully. This was a lesson I learned pretty early on in my career. I was actually it was formerly Blackwater at the time. I don't know what it is now, but a defense contractor company. But Eric Prince started it. But we were doing some training there in the gun industry, and at the time it was Academy. And the CEO had said to us, he said, "Look, it's really simple how I view management and leadership in our business. This is like a multi-billion-dollar business every year." And he said, "Here's what we do: we find great men." And we give them full responsibility and full accountability. We do not micromanage. We let them do their jobs. And that stuck with me. Like, if you want to build a great organization, you need great people. And so, just as we've surrounded ourselves with great people, it's like, Ethan does books and he's teaching and we haven't tried to micromanage that process. We said, look, you're qualified. You guys are qualified to do this. Do it. We obviously have oversight and accountability, but really run with it.
This is the first time I've actually been in a situation. I've heard that said a lot.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I've ever seen it practically actually executed.
Yeah.
Where genuinely, there's not a clock in time. Like if I show up at 8:45 or if I show up at 7:45, no one, they're like, hey, I guess he's doing whatever he's supposed to be doing. Right? Like,
yeah.
And as long as things are put out on time and things are done the way they're supposed to be done, things are communicated. It really is sort of like, here, that's in your court. That's your ball to run with over there.
Yeah, it's really treating it like, the way I view it is like Hardmen Podcast or any of the shows we do, any of the projects. It's really like a small business. And so we're saying to a lot of young guys, like, run this small business within the business. And we'll give you coaching, we'll give you feedback, we have systems and processes and all that, but we want to set you up to succeed. But I think generally you're not going to find that in a corporate environment. People are generally not willing to give somebody that much leash.
Yeah.
I think it was a lesson early on. I was working corporate jobs and I was talking to my father about this. And my dad, who had a long and successful career, he actually just retired, but he was a VP multiple times over and in the energy sector and did a great job, was respected in his field. And he told me, he said, the number one failure I see in managers who want to become leaders, he said, is they're afraid to surround themselves with talented people. And so what he said is, you want to hire guys under you who can push you up. And he had worked for Arco Coal Company. And this was kind of one of the, like in the 80s, you don't see companies like this anymore. But he said they would constantly do this. They would give you like a whole department as a young guy, and they'd be like, there you go. And they would promote from within, and they would give you just insane opportunities. They paid well, all that. So I kind of took that and I said, what if we actually kind of wound the clock back? We stopped treating our employees like disposable cell phones. We treated them like men, and then we gave them real opportunities to succeed or fail. Mm-hmm. That was kind of I think the thrust behind that. And it's been across the organizations, like with the church, even with the elders. Like when you guys became elders, we had discussions about this, but we're like, we're not going to treat you like junior guys. We're going to give you a parish. We're going to give you coaching. We're going to give you all the tools you need. But then we're going to say, run with it. You're going to fail. You're going to learn from it, and we're going to be there to help, but we're not going to babysit.
Yeah, I think a couple points that you don't see, right? One, you're describing a meritocracy.
Yeah.
Not there's this path and you do this and you do this and you need this job and you need experience over here and like you just follow this path and you get to where you want to be. It's like, no, like if people are doing well at what you've given them, then you give them more responsibility. And I think that's something we don't see in the world very often.
Yeah, you test a guy, and then when he succeeds, you give him what in our modern corporate world would be an insane amount of responsibility.
The other part would be the fear, right? I think in a lot of organizations, there's a fear of if I bring in a high cap guy, he's going to supersede me, right? If I'm not that good. He's really, Tate shows up, he's a high cap guy. Like what if he takes my job? What if I'm, and there's this fear of like, well, I better get somebody mediocre so that I can kind of coast.
Well, I had seen this a lot in ministry and in the corporate world, but you just had all these ministries, whether it was MacArthur World or John Piper World, or it was kind of across the board. Mark Driscoll was kind of the same way, where you had one guy who had a lot of charisma, and he would surround himself eventually, if not in the beginning, but eventually he would surround himself with rubber stamp yes men. And what you saw in those circles was there was like one leader who could never be questioned. He was the face of the organization. And then around him were a lot of like, I would say mid-quality managerial types. Like they could never be the face of the brand. And he kept him around because he knew that.
Yeah.
There were no threats. Contrast what we've tried to build. And I think this goes back to Brian. He really meant it when he said there's not a fixed pie of glory. He was one of the few pastors that I had experienced where I would come into the church and they would say, wow, you're really talented and that means you're a threat. And so we're going to like push you to the side. Mm-hmm. Whereas Brian was like, no, like, I remember that like the first couple times I preached, Brian was like, that is great. Like you can clearly communicate and we're going to give you more responsibility and more roles. And I was kind of like, wow. And then, I was kind of like feeling the guys out like, oh yeah, but somewhere they're going to stab me in the back.
Because that's just what you're used to.
That's what I was used to. Yeah. And that wasn't the case. And I think with Dan and Brian particularly, there was always a focus on we're not a one-man band. Brian is obviously super, super talented. Like I think a generational talent, but he doesn't act that way.
Yeah.
He's more than happy. Like the executive pastor, Brian was like, you're super gifted at kind of organizational stuff and, organizing people to get a mission done. And I was kind of blown away originally because he was like, yeah, we'll give you the responsibility. We'll have you do those things. You're better at them than I am. And I was like, wow, well, first of all, it takes a lot of humility to say that. But then also it was humbling for me because I could see all the ways in which, Brian is, I've said this recently because I've been watching a lot of Charlie Kirk stuff. He's sort of a Charlie Kirk in that he can make arguments on really controversial things. He has a steel trap of a mind. He's a great debater, but he does it in a way that people like him. My foray is more pissing people off. Now, it's funny. That's the social media side. It probably not as much like internal.
No, I don't think that that's the case at all when you have just interpersonal relationships going on. I don't think that's what people around here think. Or people online.
Even pastorally. Like,
yeah,
common refrain, right? Like, leaving your office is like, I didn't know Eric was so pastoral. Like,
yeah, they're like, I had several, I probably have dozens of these, but like people come, they want to ask questions because they've seen my social media. And I remember one young lady told me, she was like, wow, you're like a normal person. And I was like, thank you.
I appreciate that.
I appreciate that. I think part of it too, though, is just that's what you need in an organization. You need multiple skill sets, multiple tools, multiple personalities. And I just think that boomer model of building everything around one guy, like MacArthur, is obviously just passed away. But it was interesting. Probably about 3 years ago, I was talking to a friend who goes to that church. And I said, what's going to happen when MacArthur, passes? Everybody dies. And he said, I don't know, like everything's kind of built around him. He said, I don't even know if I'll go to the church anymore. And I was thinking, well, I would tend to view that as somewhat of a failure in succession.
Yeah.
Whereas I look at our team and I think, because of that realization of the shortness of time, 20 years ago, I was 20, now I'm 40. My kid's getting, he's married, a kid on the way. And I'm looking at and I'm thinking, okay, in 20 more years, that last 20 was quick. 20 more years, like my son and your sons, like they have to be, and you guys, you have to be ready to take on the mantle.
Yeah.
And so just seeing that work, like, wow, we've got to train guys. We've got to, do so much work to pass things on so that, you guys are ready. Our kids are ready. But I think about this. This is a unique feature of Refuge Church. We regularly cycle through all the elders preach. Brian obviously does the bulk of it, but
They're all part of the liturgy, like up there every Sunday.
yeah, part of the liturgy, which is an expression of authority. And it's really interesting because on the Sundays when Brian isn't preaching, nothing changes. We don't get people being like, wow, that sucked, or wow, what a letdown. It's, and Brian will be the first to tell you it's a beautiful thing because it's like, we don't skip a beat.
No. And I think that's a great thing. I think if Brian dropped dead today and anybody else took on the main teaching role, like our church wouldn't change. Like people are not here just to hear Brian preach.
Right.
He's an amazing, gifted preacher, and we're super blessed to have him. But anybody else, I think, on the team could do that, and the church wouldn't change.
And Brian would be the first to tell you.
Who's going to lead music, though?
That's a fact. It'll be Ben.
It will be, we're going to do, I mean, we're already like trying to recruit for that, but, that's another good example though, even for Brian, of he's had to do the same things where it's like, he literally used to run everything on the liturgy.
Yeah.
And then getting other guys involved. Getting even other music guys involved. Like obviously Brian is super involved in that, but we're envisioning the day where it's like, we want to call other young men up to that role and maybe have like a music minister and, all that.
So we've discussed the kind of like the fact that there's no fixed pie of glory, that the pie keeps growing. And so you have guys who are capable of going out and winning a ton of glory, who are okay with delegating things.
Yeah.
Because they're okay and like even happy to see their friends do well.
Yeah.
What other underlying principles are there at work here within New Christendom Press or even within Refuge Church that allow us to kind of cast that further vision and start thinking early about covenant succession stuff? Because everything is so family oriented. Like we, in almost every conversation we have on this podcast, end up talking about our sons or daughters in some way. Mm-hmm. What do you want to hand off to them as an inheritance physically? What do you want to hand off to them as an inheritance spiritually, mentally, all of these different things. But I think that there's so much about this that comes back to child rearing so often. It's like, what's going on in the household?
Yeah.
So your sons have grown up in a household where family worship is practiced. They know what it looks like to lead it well. And they're also part of the factor of like the guy up on the stage has to be a high caliber guy because the people in the pews are high caliber people.
Yeah.
And if things suddenly take a massive downturn and there's guys up there that don't know what they're doing, can't carry the weight, can't carry the water, there's going to be men in the congregation that go, hey, what's going on? Like, this is not how we're supposed to, this is not the standard that we're held to.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like what other things are working to kind of contribute to that overall vision of being ready to hand off the reins and bring new guys up, call them up, train them up?
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of it obviously is the post-millennial vision. I think, and it's one thing to talk about the theology, but then to apply it. But one of those applications for societal communal transformation has to be that you're thinking in legacies and generations, right? So that's kind of embedded in that. I would also say when you think about building the new Christendom, which is something that we've aimed at, okay, what you're talking about is a massive project. And so massive projects, they require the kind of leadership that's organizational, meaning you have to organize a lot of people to be rowing in the same direction at the same time. Part of that, like on Brian's side, heavily is like communicating the vision. On my side, it is the nuts and bolts of, conversations with the future leaders and leaders of the church to say like, do you lack any tools you need to get your job done? What do you need from me? Where are you struggling? Where do you need more tools? We had that conversation with Kevin Griffin, he took over in the pastoral counseling seat. And, I had a conversation with him, like, what do you think it would take for you to crush this role? And he said, I'd like to get ACBC certified. And I said, that's a great idea. We've got a guy down the road at another church who's a trainer, and let's get you in touch. Let's build a relationship there, and let's get you counseling training. So they've done that, and he's going to be certified, I think, soon. So it's that angle. I think at a very practical level with sons, I remember being in this church. I think my son was about 15 or 16, my oldest at the time. And we had this conversation. He said, Dad, it's really intimidating being in this church because there's so many high cap guys. And he said, I feel like anything and everything I do, my mistakes, failures, successes, all of them, I feel like they reflect on you. And that puts a lot of pressure on me. And I said, you're right. There's a lot of pressure on you. Everyone is watching you. Mm-hmm. And then I said to him, it was just one of those pivotal father-son conversations. I said, you will have to rise to a level you cannot fathom. But hear me out. I believe in you, and I know you can do it.
Also, this is the only scenario where it is possible to do that.
Yeah.
If you're not forced to it, that's just not the way that most people work. 99 point whatever % of people are not the kind of people that can self-motivate in a vacuum to their highest potential. No, they have to be pushed by the people around them.
You have to be called up by the men. You have to see it in the other men so you can imitate it.
Yep.
But let me give you one example of how that has worked. So, even before he started the courting process, there was a young woman. We had known them from another church, pastor's daughter. And I said to Benjamin, I said, you can go for it. And let's get you ready. It's going to take a lot of prep, a lot of hard work, self-discipline, self-control, all that. And he was like, I don't know. That's kind of like shooting for the stars, Dad. And I was like, hell yeah. Yeah, it was audacious. It was an audacious goal. But what we did is we went to work, and we went through the discipleship stuff. We're reading books together, giving him opportunities with work at New Christendom and elsewhere. He really had to hustle with his school to get graduated on time so he could work a full-time job. But I love what's come out of it is, obviously, my daughter-in-law is what a queen.
Yeah.
Just amazing. I mean, you couldn't ask for better. And so they get married. His father-in-law is like, hey, I want you to run one of my businesses for me. You're going to be like the COO of this operation at 18, because he's seen the quality, right? He's seen, the hard work and the self-control and the discipline, all those things. And then so he's in a position to do that. He obviously works here at New Christendom Press as well. He's hustling. He's doing good, building a household. So I would just say to a lot of young guys, especially, and the fathers who coach them, you're underestimating what young people are capable of.
And probably even the age at which they're capable of it.
Right.
The sooner the better. I remember my dad did a bunch of the same stuff to me growing up, where it's like, no, you don't line up at the back of the line when it's time to start the drill. You line up at the front. You're supposed to be showing everyone how this is done.
Yeah.
And that's always the expectation, even in those really small moments where that starts to become the expectation for yourself.
Yeah.
Is that you lead by example. I'm always supposed to do things a certain way. You said something the other day in one of the podcasts about the most important thing about being an adult was punctuality and common courtesy.
Yeah.
And just the simple basic things like that of I said I was going to be here at this time, I'm going to be here at that time or before it, or I'm going to let someone know that I'm not going to be there right then.
Yeah.
Right. And you see this happen constantly. Ben's like this. But we had football practice last night. I'm pulling into the parking lot. It's still 6 minutes before practice is supposed to start. I get a text from him on my way. And he's going, I'm not there yet. And I probably should be there already, but I'm not. So I'm letting you know, I didn't just forget. I'm on the way.
Yeah.
And there's always this very high standard of this is how men should behave. This is the high expectation. And the sooner I think that you can get young men to understand how high the expectation is for them, the better.
Yeah, and it's kind of twofold, right? So you're letting them know. Like I didn't say to my son in that situation, "Oh no, you don't worry about the pressure. Like nobody's looking at you. Just do the best you can." No, like none of that. That's fake and gay. I was like, no, like yeah, the stakes are like astronomical for you and for me. But and here's often the missing ingredient: calling him up and then being a father in his corner and saying, I got you every step of the way. I'm going to be right behind you, pushing you up. Steve Harvey, I thought this was really cool. Steve Harvey, comedian, terrible person, but this was a good a good part of the interview. He had a really interesting remark about fathers. He said, a good father is the only person in the world that wants you to be better than him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think in our community, what we've actually modeled is we want all the young men to be better than us. Right. So we're fathers in a broader sense.
Yeah.
But I think what he's saying is true. Like, most men are like, well, I don't want you to be better than me.
Of course.
But that's a unique role, I think, for fathers. And I've said it to my son all the time. I want you to go further. I want you to be better. We're going to set you up in every possible way. So I think if you get that ingredient across the community and all the fathers are doing that and everybody's doing that, I mean, Gen 1 is cool, but Gen 2 is going to be...
It's going to be so much better because a lot of these things we figured out for the first time
on the fly.
We didn't inherit them, right? Like necessarily. Maybe we did from our fathers in the church,
bits and pieces
way back.
Yeah,
and there are pieces. Obviously, we're standing on our parents' shoulders as well. But a lot of even some of the Reformed traditions and some of the liturgy and so just even the managerial and leadership models that we're trying to do here in the church and New Christendom, like, was not modeled in any other organization we were ever at. So if they're picking up, at least, down the road of what we leave off, like it's going to be so much better.
Yeah. And I think one of the upsides, like, okay, so I look at my own position and you guys are there in many different ways too, but you could view it from one perspective as like Hard Men Podcast. I could view it as like, oh, it's a loss for me. Like the thing that I loved, it really was my passion project. Like, I could view it as a letting go, as like a bad thing. But I could also look at it and I could say, actually, the thing was successful. It's created opportunities for other men to feed their families and be productive and use their gifts. And I've actually been called up into a broader thing. And that's what Christ says to us. Like, if you're faithful with little, I'll give you more.
Yeah.
And you'll have a greater area of... Paul even talks about this. Like, I had a greater area of opportunity for service, right? I have a greater window now because of his sufferings and persecutions to go do more work.
Mm-hmm. The analogy is kind of like when Dick Winters gets promoted and he's like, I don't want to, I'm staying with Easy Company. Right. And I think his promotion like major and he was, obviously did take, obviously eventually take the promotion, but he was like, I want to stay here. These are my guys. This is my work. But he could have a huge impact on a lot more guys by taking the promotion and being, the battalion commander or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that's partly some of the hardest things. Like there are hard aspects of it. When I was doing just parish pastoring and like Hard Men Podcast, for example, I do miss that because you had a sergeant-like relationship with your men and with the people in the church. And I loved that. So it was really hard. Like stepping up meant you're viewed differently. Like when if it's a general or whatever it is, there's fewer of you. So you have less peers and that can be hard. But also you don't have like the day-to-day interaction with the people in the same way.
Yeah.
So that's an adjustment. But again, I think... This is kind of, I think all men, whether it's my son, whether it's me, all men have to come to this point where they realize what's happening is you're being called up, which means you're being given more responsibility. You're bearing more weight. And weight bearing is how you become weighty. So the gravitas comes from bearing weight.
100%.
And so in the community, it is kind of funny because people will say like, oh, like, you have this title now. That's really cool. And you, as a leader, you're sitting there, you're just going, oh, you have no idea what the cost But then anytime you can be discouraged about that, you look at Paul and like in 2 Corinthians, he'll go through the list of all his sufferings. And then he says, and then on top of that, I have the weight of caring for all the churches. Like that was the icing on the top of his personal persecution. So I think just training men that like bearing the weight is good.
Yeah.
Going through these hardships is good. I've been loving on the Titus 2, which again, the boys program for working out on the tag. I didn't even know this till recently, but on the tag, what's the line?
Every decision I make affects my people.
Holy cow. I mean, that's just for young men. I think about that all the time. Like every decision I'm making, there's like 500 people in Ogden where that like deeply impacts their families. It's again, that is weight, that's pressure.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing.
Yep. What's awesome is to see them latch onto that. I actually sort of adopted it and changed it a little bit. We had something very similar to that in my public high school football program growing up. And we did push-ups and we said the words at the beginning and end of every off-season workout, at the end of, beginning and end of every practice during the season. And I got here and we started the Titus 2 lifting program. And I was like, we need something like that communicates and just pounds into their head in a Proverbs kind of way that this is not disconnected. Like everything matters. There's nothing that's happening in a vacuum that is not affecting you and therefore all of the people who care and love for you.
Yeah.
And that you hold responsibility for. And it's really cool to see them latch onto that and then go, actually, they get it. And they go, there's weight attached to this, which means I've become important now. Like I'm not just like this person that's, dragging along behind the organization or the church as it goes about its mission. I'm actually part of what's going on. I've got an oar in my hand too. Yeah. And they latch onto it and they love it. And it's great. Like apparently there's boys doing that like on their own.
In Form 2.
Yeah. And they're not in the program yet.
Yeah.
And they're already like, no, like we're coming.
Yeah.
Like that. We're going to be there someday. We need to be ready to be there when we get there.
Yeah. I mean, I think of even my middle son, the other day, he just loves to work out. He'll work out like 3 times a day if you let him. And he was down in the basement and he had like the 200-pound sandbag. And he was like, Dad, you want to try it? I did it twice. And I was like, okay, that's great. And he was down there for another hour working on sandbags. And I asked him one time, I was like, why? Not to mention he gets up at, 5 a.m. every day and reads Livy and Plutarch. And, he's working on Latin and Greek and all these things. And I said, why? And he reiterated that line on the t-shirt. He's like, it's for our people. And man, you just think about that. And what kind of community would you get if you had people who thought that way all the time?
Starting when they're teenagers.
Yeah, he's 16 years old.
Yeah.
And he's already thinking about those things. Now, the other point I would say, the importance of community and having great men around. I think a lot of fathers make the mistake of thinking, I can be the only one teaching my son that and he'll get it all. And the reality is you need a whole community of men where, like, if I had to be my oldest, if I had to be the only one that rode him hard on these principles, I think there's a chance that he would get exasperated. But I can kind of let the other guys do it. And when Ethan's busting his chops about not showing up for a shooting event or whatever it is, like, it's not Dad. It's not just Dad. It's the whole community of men being like, I thought we had a standard.
There is more weight when it's not just one guy.
Yeah.
Who's because it adds it adds the truth to it. Because if it's just one guy telling you do this, eventually you might be like, maybe he's wrong. But when everybody is unanimously saying the same things all the time and holding our young men to the same standard, there's a truth you can't ignore.
Yes.
And then I remember we obviously didn't have a community like this, but there were moments where that thing would happen, basically what you just described, where my father's expectations were massive and they were, very high. And we were constantly chipping away at those. And I didn't resent it ever. I don't remember going through a phase where I was rebellious against my dad. I always had in the back of my head, he's right. But it's still your son's still prone to be exasperated by it.
Yeah.
And even if he knows it's true. And I remember like it coming from a different direction at some point. And then my first thing was like to go and tell him, like, as if I was going to complain or something. And he's like, yeah, I told you. like, do you think I was just making this up? Like,
Yeah.
It actually justifies and it shows, it exemplifies for your son that you've been telling him the truth.
Yeah.
When there are other men around who also hold him to that standard.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask, whether you have an organization kind of trying to function the way we do, or you're in one and you're like, how do I be effective? How do I gain responsibility and gain authority? Like what are you looking for as a leader in an organization like that? And then, whether you're top down, looking for who do I want to put in these seats on the bus, or I'm here. It's more than just, well, I'm here. Like, give me something to do. Like I'm here. Like,
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say, and this is held true, like in our teams, that was kind of one of the things I think that I ended up doing executive pastor work, was because everybody has gifts and you just start using them, and people around you are like, hey, you're actually good at that. At the time I thought, well, everybody thinks this way. So I would see tasks or problems or chaos somewhere in the organization, and I would say, that's a problem. But then I would think about it like a GM or a head coach, and I would think, okay, I can't do it. But then I would watch and I would say, yeah, but Ethan's really good at that. That's kind of how, whether he likes it or not, Ethan teaching, I was just thinking we had a hole that we had to fill in one of the teaching spots. And I remember sitting down with some of the guys and I said, you know who's amazing at working with young men and all the men in the church respect him? And they were like, who? And I was like, Ethan. And it was funny because I said it, and then like Brian and Dan were like, you're right. So what is that? Like, let me explain, like, what is that skill set? And what do I look for in future leaders? I am looking for men who exemplify, I think it was his second book, like 12 More Rules for Life, Jordan Peterson. He said, if you want to grow in gravitas and leadership, and you want to go up in the hierarchy, be the kind of person who sees abdication of responsibility and steps in the gap to take responsibility. Wherever you see abdication, take responsibility. Nobody has to ask you to do it. So you look at all the guys in the church who are in positions of pastoral leadership. The reason Kevin Griffin got appointed to counseling was not because I just said, hey, we have a gap and you need to do it. It was because we had already seen him stepping in the gap to alleviate a problem in the counseling world within the church. He would just naturally, like, he was the guy who would, oh man, this family needs long-term counseling. And he would buy resources and he would create a plan and he would just step in the breach. And that happened enough times in over about a year where we all just, I remember making the proposal to the team. I said, it's a crazy proposal. Hear me out. Here's what I think. Kevin Griffin should be our counseling pastor. And here's why. And immediately, and this is the way appointing and, ratifying the decision on leaders should happen. Everyone in that room said, we see that too. Absolutely. 100%. I think a lot of guys in organizations, they're like, well, I don't do a job unless it's on my job description. Mm-hmm. And you shouldn't think that way. You should, this is what I've appreciated about Ethan and the Titus 2 and guild training for our deacons and a lot of the churchmen and stuff like that. He was already doing those things. Mm-hmm. Like, I looked at somebody who was already just taking responsibility on himself and saying, hey, there's a problem, I'm going to help. And you could see competence, gifting, all those things lining up. And so the point when we go to the elder team and you say, I think Ethan should be in charge of the guild. People were like, yep, that's absolutely true. That's his gifting. That fits. So I think it's that initiative and drive to take your gifts, have a wise assessment about what your gifts are, and don't wait for permission. Don't wait for somebody to ask you to alleviate a problem. Just where you see problems and you see that your gifts fit, go start alleviating those problems.
And then I think to add to that, don't like spend 2 days doing this and then look up and go, is everyone noticing?
Yeah.
Like, just do it. Just do it because it needs to be done. And then someone will tap you on the shoulder while your head is down and go, hey, this is really good. Would you want this title or an additional set of responsibilities. Rather than like the constant, there's a difference between doing the work and then immediately looking for the credit and doing the work because the work needs to be done.
Yeah. And I mean, a good example of that too would be like Kevin Love, who's a headmaster, but he's also sort of like I forget his actual title, which is funny. But he's sort of like director of operations on the elder team. So he reports to me, but as we were thinking through last year, like how can we clean up elder meetings? How can we, be more streamlined and make sure like due outs get done? And like, we need to have regular elder meetings, but quarterly, annual ones too, not just the weeklies.
With a different scope and purpose.
Yeah. Like what's our mission as a church? Are we getting tasks done on time? Are we fulfilling our mission to the people and to Christ, who's head of the church? I just was like bouncing ideas off different guys, and Kevin and I had a lot of conversations. So what do you think about this, Kevin? And he would come back with like, oh, I just spent hours, this book is really helpful for here. And I know it's business, but we can apply these principles. And here's what I think the meeting structure should be. And here's how you should handle due outs. And here's how, so we go through that and I'm like, Kevin's already doing it. And I'm like, whoa, Kevin is like super qualified for this job. So I went to him and I said, hey, Kevin. And by the way, Kevin was kind of in a position at the point where he's like, I want to do more. I want to be more useful to the team, but I'm kind of sitting on the bench. Right. And I just think it's like, as a good coach, you're looking at the guy on the bench, you're saying, what's he good at? And then you start talking with him, picking his brain, and you go, holy cow. Like we have an underutilized resource over here. And it's funny because once Kevin started doing that role, he was like, you could see the lights come on. Like when a person is using their gifts, they're full of joy. Like they're inspired. They're passionate about it.
Mm-hmm. Just makes them happy to do it.
Yeah.
So
I think that is what I'm looking for, is guys who are taking responsibility of their own accord, applying their gifts and skills to serve. And then when you go to make that call and say like, I think this person should be in this position with this, whether it's pay or authority or responsibility, whatever. And then you want it to be the case where everybody on the team goes, that's exactly right.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think we've described it as giddy up and whoa guys.
Oh yeah.
Like that's what you're describing is.
Yeah. We don't really. So like the whoa guys are the guys you got to kick to do something. There's not a single guy in leadership that we would tolerate that for the most part. I mean, like there's just not. And people say, well, that's cruel. And you say, well, but in an organization like ours, with people in the pew like ours, they don't tolerate it.
No.
And so you need hard chargers. We have whoa guys for the most part, where especially the young guys, when you first call them into leadership positions, you're like, love the energy. I was talking to Tim Six about this, and he said, yeah, in the Air Force, in the F-35 program, we call that all thrust, no vector.
But that's actually another principle, I think.
But we want that kind of guy.
Where that guy's correctable.
Yes.
And we're not a one strike and you're out kind of thing.
No.
Right? Most organizations I've ever been a part of, it's like one strike and you're done. You're fired. And you make one mistake, and that's not the way it should be, right? You want to be able to train guys and coach guys and steer them in the right direction and learn from mistakes. And that, that guy is going to be better than the guy you fire the first time he messes up.
That's absolutely right. And I think a big part of it is, I'll use Ben as an example because he was one of the younger guys who came on the team. He was passionate. Every young guy is going to make mistakes. But I would say the thing that it's another piece in that leadership, how our leadership team functions. Ben was in my lifetime, one of the most correctable, teachable men that I've ever worked with. I remember conversations where I was like, hey man, like we got to change this, got to change that. And he was like, you're absolutely right. I'm going to do that. And then the next day, like he would come with renewed zeal to do it exactly how you said. And I was like, man, if we could have a whole community and organization full of that type of person, like it's not that you make mistakes, it's that you learn from them.
Right.
Yeah. And I think even for Brian and myself, like we talk about it on the elder team, but also on the board at NCP is you have to be willing to do a nameless, rankless debrief. I remember we did an interview with Ethan, and he was talking about being in a position where you're in charge of like the flight plans for the day, and then you have like a high ranking person in that meeting, and you've got to correct them. Right. Like we all have to be open to, correction.
You're the flight lead for the day. You're doing the debrief. And number 4, the lieutenant colonel or the 06 messed up, right? Because they fly like once a week, right? They've been doing this for 20 years, but everybody makes mistakes. And do you have the stones to get up there and call out number 4 is out of position, number 4 missed the target, whatever happened? It's a humbling thing.
Yeah. But you need that on the team too. Just like being teachable, being correctable. Everybody has to submit to each other in that process.
I think another factor that's really important about that kind of organization is that you avoid constantly hiring guys who are really good at walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
Because that's not what we're looking for.
Yeah. One other thing I will just throw out there on leadership is you have to train guys to see something and say something. You have to train guys who trust their eyes. We've all been in those circumstances where say you're counseling and you see something's off, but you don't say anything. You have to cultivate it in the team where, this is especially true with the newer guys who are less experienced, but where they go, hey, I got a question. You're not afraid to be the bad guy. And you're like, did anybody else think that what that person said was extremely weird? Like, does anybody else feel off about this? Because I do. Mm-hmm. Like, that's actually a fear of man type thing. But because you get into meetings and so many people are like, well, I don't want to put myself out there and then walk on eggshells. I don't want to be wrong about this or seem callous
or rock the boat or like, what is the aftermath of me saying this? Like now what's going to come back to me? It's kind of like the taking the log out of your eye kind of thing of like, by what standard you judge, you're going to be judged by. Like, well, if I call this out, then all of my stuff's about to get called out too. Like, are we going to make each other better, or are we just going to kind of pretend like those things don't exist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's, it's something that has to be trained. For myself, I've actually had to like train it in reverse where it's like, speaking the truth was never like I was like, yeah, but it's true. And so for me, it's actually putting some reins on that. And guys were like, wow, Eric, that was an a-hole comment. That was actually rude, that sort of thing. But that is the good thing about the team too is, and maybe the final thing I'll say just about leaders, they have to be courageous. You have to take risks. And from a managerial organizational perspective as a leadership, I want to correct guys when they make mistakes, but I never want them to be afraid of making mistakes. I don't want them to be averse to risk because everything that we do is risky, right? Like being on social media and saying true things, risky business, And so, yeah, guys who are courageous, on the elder team, especially, I would say guys who are, this was the first elder team I've ever been a part of where it's like, hey, this conversation needs to happen. It's going to be really hard. And then a guy would be like, okay, I'll do it. And then they would just go have the conversation and come back and be like, yep, it went poorly, but I did it.
Yeah. Well, even with the courage, there's courage internally to do the right thing and say the right thing. But so much of this is outwardly facing.
Yeah.
Where there is always artillery coming back in to what you're doing. So like part of the thing is like having the hardened organization that everybody has your back.
Yes.
Right. And like I can take risks because I've got 7 other guys, who are going to back me on this.
There's an extreme loyalty that has to be present.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's super important. And it gives guys, knowing you have other guys on your team that are going to back you, whether it's outwardly facing or to the public or whatever, like that. That's so important.
Yeah, we don't leave each other hanging out to dry. And one thing too, I would say is like it's an NFL football mentality. I'm sure you've heard this too, but like they have to talk to the press. But the thing is, like you don't air your dirty laundry to the press.
Yeah.
Right. You handle things internally. You handle them in the locker room. What happens in the locker room stays there. Your public face externally is like, yep, love my guys, doing great. And then privately is when you're having the direct conversation with each other.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We've talked about this before, I think, but the other instinct is actually attached to the feminization and emasculation of our culture, to constantly reach for a third party authority to judge the situation that you're in rather than handling it face to face yourself is an effeminate tendency.
Yeah.
And I think you have to realize that at its core in order to really be diligent and disciplined about not doing that. Not airing your dirty laundry to the world.
Yeah.
Is understanding that it's actually effeminate when you do that.
Yeah, it's also interesting, kind of from the leadership perspective. Ed Friedman talks about this in Failure of Nerve, but as a leader, you also have to be willing to be hated and disliked. You remember some of the best leaders and coaches probably in your life. It's weird. They know how to get under your skin. Mm-hmm. They know how to push buttons. You don't always like them. Being liked is not a virtue. Obviously, you want to be feared, respected, loved. But I think about fathers who are often that way. I know Dad has my back, but he's also not afraid. Like a good coach, the number of coaches I've had, the best ones were they irritated me sometimes. They knew how to get the best out of me. Broncos fans who are watching Sean Payton and him and Bo Nix are screaming at each other on the sidelines, but they're good, mm-hmm. And so I think there's also a part of that too, that if you're going to lead well, you're often going to be you might be the hated guy in the room, and you have to be willing to do that too.
For the good of your people in the pursuit of the mission. On that same note, I was actually going to bring this story up a minute ago when you were talking about coachability and young guys being able to take feedback, and then respond to it, because we're different. You're much more similar to my dad, who's yeah, I'm okay with pissing everybody off. I'm just going to say the thing that's true. I've always been way more timid, and he had to constantly force me to be more vocal. But I would encourage guys you can improve. If you need to move in a particular direction, it's not like you're set in stone there and your feet are in concrete blocks. You can actually make progress in the direction that you need to make progress. You just need feedback on where you need to go.
Yeah.
But I had on that same note, I had a linebacker coach who called me hesitate for the first four games of a season one time. It was the first 4 weeks on the defensive side of the ball. He would go, "There's hesitate again." We'd be watching film, and that's how he would refer to me in film. Was I was indecisive. I was scared I was going to make some sort of mistake, and then rather than just picking a direction and going and trusting my instincts, I would kind of stand back there and dance around for a minute before I made it. And so I was late all the time. And if you're a half step late, then you're late. And he finally, just by antagonizing the crap out of me and getting under my skin, got me to the point where that stopped happening. But it did take him just pissing me off and making fun of me for a solid month for it to work.
That wasn't your only nickname on that team, was it?
I had a bunch of nicknames.
I had a bunch. When I played baseball, my nickname was Hollywood. Which was not a compliment. I remember showing up to practice and I wore aviators, and I was, I like to entertain people.
Got a little bit of your youngest son is a little bit like this.
Yeah. So it was basically, as my coach would say, quit jacking around.
Yeah.
Focus on the task, work hard, be about baseball. But yeah, it irritated me. But it irritated me into the right course of action too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
those are useful.
I can't wait for spring baseball. With Titus 2 boys. We haven't done this yet. We've done football, we've done basketball, but I cannot wait to get them out and play baseball.
Oh yeah, it's so great. It's like the all-American sport.
Dude, baseball makes me nervous. I remember being really young and this is T-ball. But we had a first baseman and I played pitcher, which was essentially shortstop when you're playing T-ball. It's just where the ball gets hit the most. And the kid on first base couldn't catch the ball. And I knew he couldn't catch the ball. And I was super timid. And my dad's it's not your job to make sure that he catches the ball. Your job is to make sure the ball gets there fast.
Oh no, I know where this is going.
And he's you throw it. I don't care. He's if I see you stand up and then lob the ball over to him so that he hopefully catches it one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. Like the next ball that's hit to you, you pick it up and you sling it to first base. And I'm like, he's not going to catch it. And he's like, I don't care.
That's his problem.
The very next ball, field this thing, hum it to first base, goes straight over the kid's glove, punches him right in the nose.
Oh.
He's bawling. I'm crying because I made him cry. It was a fiasco, but it was like, it was that thing where it's like, no, you do your job. I don't like, that's not over there your job. Like your responsibility is to get the ball.
I remember that in high school ball. I was a catcher, so we're doing like tryouts, and we had some kids who were trying out who were like, yeah, they were kind of the nerds and they didn't make the team, you know. But we were standing there, so I'm catching the ball. Coach is hitting the ball with a fungo at home plate. Mm-hmm. I'm catching all the return balls, and coach hits to the right fielder. And this kid, he goes up and he's like, has both arms up like this. I don't know why. Like, just, you know. And the ball hits him square in the forehead. And coach looks at me and he goes, did he just take that one off the dome? And I was like, I think he did. And coach was like, yeah, like, it is a liability. Like, that kid's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But good memories, yeah.
Baseball just makes me a little nervous. You never know.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good.
They've responded really well to some physicality on the basketball court and on the football field. So.
Yeah, even the last couple weeks of football, we've seen pretty drastic improvement.
Yeah. I mean, we practiced last night. I had a blast. We had the right number of kids where I basically got to play, you know, all-time quarterback for both teams. We're playing, you know, like drawing up trick plays in the dirt, and they're going back and forth. They're talking trash. There's a little bit of physicality getting involved, even though they're supposed to be pulling flags, but we end up on the ground about half the time.
I think my son's been involved.
Yeah, it was good. It was a lot of fun. All right. I think that kind of covers what we wanted to cover here in the after hours. If you guys want to stick around for the Brutal American Show, we're going to talk a little bit about some more practical examples about how we want to kind of execute this covenant succession thing here at Refuge Church, how we're thinking about that, some of the stuff that we're already moving on in that arena. So, Eric, thanks so much for coming back on your show.
Dude, I hope you guys stay frosty. I hope you fight the good fight. I hope you act like men. That was the tagline.
Tate says it every time.
We do it every time.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that.
Now we have to write it down sometimes because we'll forget it.
Dude, the funniest thing when I first started recording that, I was like, we had just moved. So we're looking for a house. We're living at my in-laws. I'm like in my mother-in-law's quilting room. And everyone in the house can hear me. And I'm like, stay frosty, fight a good fight, act like man. And then everybody, you hear laughter in the other room. And I was like, I swear I'm not a LARPer. That was, it's very emasculating to be in the quilting room, but it worked. You know?
Like for everyone who's got these big ambitions to start and stuff like this, like it's probably going to be pretty painful.
Start small.
It starts small. It's probably get like the thing that you want to go do when you do like accomplish it and you have the role that you want. It's probably going to be way more work than you're expecting it to be, but good.
I think it took me like 8 hours to edit the first episode. But I am the guy with like my flashlight's probably on right now. So way out of my depth, but yeah, you can do it. You can just do things.
You can just do stuff. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you on the Patreon for the Brutal American Show.